My name is Emily Carter, and I am 26 years old. I never expected that the place where I went to heal would be the place where my entire life changed. It was a quiet Thursday evening when I first saw him. The grief support room smelled faintly of coffee and old books. People sat in a circle, each carrying stories too heavy to say out loud. And then he walked in. His name was Michael Reed. His eyes were tired, red like he hadn't slept properly in days. His hands trembled slightly as he held a paper cup of coffee, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping him steady. When he introduced himself, his voice cracked halfway through. He had lost his wife to cancer, and he was raising his 6-year-old daughter alone. I didn't fall in love with him in that moment, not like people describe in movies. It was something quieter, something deeper, recognition. Like, I understood him without him saying much at all, because I lost someone too. My younger brother, in a sudden accident that still didn't feel real even months later. Grief has a strange way of connecting strangers. It pulls you into the same silence, the same emptiness. We started talking after the sessions. At first, it was just simple conversations. How are you holding up? Did you sleep last night? But slowly, those talks turned into long messages. Late-night texts. Conversations about memories, pain, and the strange guilt of moving forward. And then, I met his daughter. Her name was Sophie. She had messy brown curls and the kind of bright eyes that didn't match the sadness she had already seen. The first time we met, she hid behind her dad's leg, peeking at me like I was a mystery she wasn't sure she could trust. But kids, they feel things quickly. Within weeks, she started calling me Em. Not Miss Emily, not anything formal. Just Em, like I already belonged. She would draw little pictures, stick figures of 3 people holding hands under a big yellow sun. She would proudly hand them to me, smiling like she had just created something magical. And every time, my heart would ache in a way I couldn't explain. Because somewhere deep inside, I started to feel it too. This wasn't just friendship anymore. This was becoming something real, something dangerous, something that could either heal everything or break me all over again. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment where everything suddenly changed. No dramatic confession, no grand realization. Just small things, quiet dinners, long walks after support group meetings, conversations that lasted until 2 a.m. when the world was asleep but our thoughts refused to rest. And somewhere between all of that, Michael became my safe place. The first time he asked me out, it wasn't even really a date. He said, "There's this small cafe nearby, nothing special, but the coffee's good." I smiled and said yes, even though I already knew it wasn't about the coffee. That night, something shifted. The way he looked at me, softer now. The way I laughed, without forcing it for the first time in months. It felt right. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And Sophie, she didn't wait for permission to accept me. By then, she was already a constant part of my life. She would run to the door when I visited, her little footsteps echoing through the apartment before she threw herself into my arms like she had known me forever. Look what I made," she would say, holding up drawings filled with bright colors. 3 stick figures. Always 3. At first, I didn't think much of it. But one night, I noticed something different. She had written names above each figure. Dad, Sophie, and next to them, Mom. I froze. My chest tightened as I stared at that word. It wasn't just a drawing anymore. It was a place she had already given me, and I didn't know if I was ready for that. But the truth was, I already felt it too, not as a responsibility, not as something I was forced into, but as something I wanted. When Michael proposed a year later, there was no hesitation in my answer, because by that point, I wasn't just choosing him, I was choosing them. But not everyone saw it that way. When I told my parents, everything changed. My mother went silent first. Not the calm kind of silence, but the heavy kind. The kind that fills the room with judgment before a single word is spoken. And then my father spoke. His voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut through me. "You're making a mistake, Emily." I tried to explain. I told him about Michael, about Sophie, about how this wasn't something careless or rushed. But he didn't listen. "He comes with baggage," he said coldly. A child from another woman will never truly be yours. Those words hit harder than I expected. I felt something inside me break, quietly, painfully. I told him I loved them. I told him Sophie already saw me as family. And that's when he said something I will never forget. That little girl is not your family. She is his past. I sat there, frozen. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. The kitchen felt smaller, somehow, like the walls were closing in around me. This was the same table where I had grown up, where I had done my homework, laughed with my family, trusted them. And now, it didn't feel like home anymore. I can't believe you're saying this, I whispered. But my father didn't soften. If you go through with this, he continued, his voice steady, you are choosing a life of struggle. You're young, Emily. You still have options. Don't throw your future away on someone else's broken past. Broken past. That's what he called them. Michael and Sophie. Something inside me snapped. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. They're not a mistake, I said, my voice shaking but firm. They're my choice. My mother still hadn't said a word. She just sat there, staring down at her hands, like silence was easier than standing beside me. I left that house in tears. I didn't even remember the drive. My vision was blurry, my chest tight, my hands gripping the steering while like I was trying to hold myself together. By the time I reached Michael's apartment, I was completely falling apart. I barely knocked before the door opened. And then, Sophie ran toward me. She was in her pajamas, her hair messy, her face lighting up the moment she saw me. "Em," she shouted, wrapping her arms tightly around my waist. And just like that, everything inside me broke. I dropped to my knees and held her, holding on like she was the only thing keeping me grounded. Because in that moment, she was... Michael stood there quietly, watching us. He didn't ask questions right away. He didn't push. He just gave me space, and that somehow meant everything. The weeks that followed were exhausting. My mother kept calling. Every conversation sounded the same. Think about your future. You're being emotional. What will people say? But my father, he went further. He didn't just keep it within the family. He took it to the church. Without saying my name directly, he started preaching about it. About young women making foolish choices. About men with complicated pasts. About lives ruined by emotional decisions. People knew. Of course they knew. I started getting messages. Calls. Even texts from people I barely spoke to. One woman sent me a recording of his sermon. I listened to it just once. That was enough. Because hearing my own story twisted into something shameful, something wrong. It did something to me. It didn't break me. It made me certain. That same night, I sat down with Michael. I don't care what anyone says anymore, I told him. I know what I'm choosing. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was searching for doubt. But there was none. So we set a date. We booked a small venue. Nothing too fancy, just something simple, something warm. Sophie was the most excited out of all of us. She insisted on being part of everything. The dress, the flowers, even the music. And one evening, as she sat beside me with her crayons, she looked up and asked softly, "Em, when you marry Dad, does that mean you'll stay forever?" I paused. My heart tightened. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I said, "Yes, forever." The morning of my wedding, I woke up before the sun. The room was quiet. Too quiet. For a few seconds, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to slow my breathing. But my heart was racing, because deep down, I already knew. They weren't coming. Still, a small part of me hoped. I got ready slowly. Every movement felt heavier than it should. The dress, the makeup, the soft music playing in the background, it all felt like a dream I was trying not to wake up from. When I arrived at the venue, the first thing I noticed was the front row. 3 chairs, decorated with simple white ribbons. Empty. I had told the coordinator not to remove them. I didn't want to pretend they didn't matter. I wanted to feel it. The absence. The truth. For a moment, I just stood there, staring. And then, I felt a hand gently wrap around mine. It was Michael. He looked at me, his eyes soft but steady. "You're the strongest person I know," he said quietly. That was it. That was the moment I almost broke. But before I could say anything, the music started. Everyone turned. At the end of the aisle stood Sophie. She looked so small, yet so serious. Her little white dress moved softly as she walked, tiny steps, careful and focused like she understood how important this moment was. But she wasn't just walking. She was holding something, a small pink board clutched tightly in her hands. I hadn't seen it before. No one had told me about it. As she walked closer, the room grew quieter. Not silent, but emotional. You could feel it. A few people started crying. Then more. By the time she reached halfway down the aisle, there wasn't a single dry eye left. My vision blurred. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. And then she reached me. I finally looked down at the board she was holding. And everything stopped. It read, "I asked God for a mom, and he sent me Emily." My knees gave out. Right there, in front of everyone. I dropped down and pulled her into my arms, holding her as tight as I could. She gently patted my back and whispered, "Don't cry, Em. It's a happy day." I laughed, through tears I couldn't control, because in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the empty chairs, not the judgment, not the pain, just her. Someone in the crowd recorded the moment. We didn't think much of it, but by the next day, the video was everywhere. Millions of people watched it. Strangers from all over the world, crying, sharing, connecting. And 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my father. He didn't say much, just that he had seen the video and that he needed time. It wasn't an apology. Not yet, but it was something, a crack in a wall I'd stopped trying to break. "I'm here when you're ready," I told him, and then I hung up. That night, I tucked Sophie into bed. She asked for 2 stories instead of 1. I smiled and said yes. I always say yes. As I sat there reading, Michael stood at the door, watching us quietly. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I understood something so clearly. Family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. Sophie chose me before I even understood what was happening. And I choose her every single day, without hesitation, without condition.